The notification from our joint account flashed across my phone. Transfer complete $152,679. I placed my phone face down on the granite kitchen island, exhaling slowly. After 18 months of scrimping, saving, and working overtime, I'd finally done it. Paid off Leo's crushing business debt. Every extra penny I'd earned from late-night design consultations had gone toward this moment. Tomorrow was our 7th anniversary, and Leo would wake up debt-free for the first time since we'd launched Caldwell Interiors together. I smiled, imagining his face when I showed him the zero balance, the weight that would lift from his shoulders. Maybe then the distance that had grown between us these past months would finally close. The front door opened, and I quickly minimized the banking app. This was a surprise, best saved for our anniversary dinner. Leo, you're home early. I glanced at the kitchen clock just past 3 in the afternoon. His architecture consulting usually kept him until at least 6. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the afternoon light. Designer briefcase clutched in one hand. Something was off. His normally immaculate appearance, the pressed shirts and perfectly knotted ties he insisted on even for home office days, looked rumpled. His face was blank, unreadable. "We need to talk, Ava." His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was discussing the weather and not using the 4 words that chill every marriage. "What's wrong? Did something happen with the Morrison project?" I moved toward him, but he stepped back, maintaining the distance between us. "I can't do this anymore." He placed his briefcase on the console table, meticulous even now. "I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've made my decision." The kitchen suddenly felt too large, the space between us expanding like the universe after the Big Bang. "What are you talking about? What decision?" "I'm leaving. This isn't working." He gestured vaguely between us, his wedding ring catching the afternoon light. The same ring I'd saved for months to buy when we were just starting out, when we'd eat takeout 3 nights a week to afford rent on our tiny first office space. I gripped the edge of the counter, steadying myself. "Leo, if this is about the money, about your debt, it's not about the money." His interruption was sharp. "It's about us. We want different things. We're moving in different directions." My mind raced, searching for signs I'd missed. Yes, he'd been distant lately, working late, weekend meetings with potential clients, the occasional business trip to scout new projects. But I'd attributed it to stress, to his pursuit of expanding our firm into commercial spaces. "When did you decide this?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow. "It doesn't matter." He glanced at his watch, the vintage Rolex I'd surprised him with last Christmas, purchased with my share of a design bonus from our biggest client. "I've already found an apartment. I'll come back for my things while you're at the office tomorrow." Tomorrow? Our anniversary. The day I'd planned to tell him he was debt-free. "Leo, please, let's talk about this. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it." I reached for him, but he stepped back again, his expression hardening. "There's nothing to fix, Ava. I've made up my mind." His tone was clinical, detached, like he was terminating a business partnership rather than ending a marriage. "I'll have my lawyer contact you next week about the divorce proceedings." "Lawyer? Divorce?" The words hit like physical blows. "You already have a lawyer?" He didn't answer, just turned toward the door, picking up the briefcase I'd gifted him when he landed his first major commercial client. The same client I'd helped him connect with through my college network. 7 years, Leo. 7 years. And you're just walking out? You don't even want to try counseling? My voice cracked, the reality of what was happening finally sinking in. He paused, hand on the doorknob. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or doubt. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that same empty stare. "It wouldn't help. Goodbye, Ava." The door closed behind him with a soft click. So anticlimactic for such a life-altering moment. I stood frozen in our kitchen, our beautiful kitchen, with the granite countertops he'd insisted on when we renovated last year. The kitchen where I'd prepared countless meals for dinner parties with his business contacts. Parties where I'd play the perfect supportive wife, networking for both our sakes. My legs finally gave out, and I sank to the floor, my back against the cool refrigerator. My phone still lay on the counter, screen dark. The notification of the transfer no longer visible. The transfer that had emptied my personal savings account, the money I'd been setting aside year after year, the safety net I'd built for us, 152,679, gone, and so was Leo. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet as night fell. I hadn't moved from the kitchen floor, my mind cycling through the same questions. Why now? What had I missed? Was there someone else? My phone buzzed from the counter above, startling me. I pulled myself up, legs numb from sitting so long. A text. From Tessa, my best friend since law school. How's the anniversary surprise coming? Is everything ready for tomorrow? A hysterical laugh escaped me. The anniversary surprise. The dinner reservation at Maria Leo's favorite seafood restaurant. The small blue box from the jeweler containing cufflinks made from the same titanium as his wedding band. The card with the bank statement showing his debt wiped clean. All meaningless now. The phone buzzed again. Ava, you there? I took a deep breath and picked up the phone, my fingers hovering over the keys. How to explain? Where to even begin? Instead, I did what I'd always done in times of crisis. I turned to facts, to concrete action. I opened the banking app and stared at our accounts. The joint checking showed the usual monthly expenses: mortgage, utilities, groceries. But there was something else. A transfer I didn't recognize, 15,000 to a company called Meridian Holdings LLC, last Tuesday. The same day Leo had claimed he was visiting a potential client in Philadelphia. I scrolled through the previous months. There another transfer to Meridian Holdings, $12,000 in March, $8,000 in February. My breath caught. I grabbed my laptop from the living room and logged into our business account for Caldwell Interiors. More transfers, smaller amounts, but consistent. Always to Meridian Holdings, always on days when Leo claimed to be meeting clients. The room spun slightly. I set the laptop aside and called the only person I trusted completely. Tessa? Something's wrong. Leo left me today, and I think he's been stealing from our business. 3 days later, I sat in our shared office space at Caldwell Interiors, surrounded by printouts of bank statements, receipts, and client contracts. The modern space that had once felt like our sanctuary now felt like a crime scene. Every surface we'd chosen together, every piece of furniture we'd carefully selected, now carried the weight of betrayal. Rena Desai, my second in command and the closest thing I had to a little sister, set a cup of coffee beside my elbow and pulled up a chair. Okay, walk me through it again, she said, her dark eyes focused and alert. Because what you're suggesting about Leo, I know how it sounds. I pushed the bank statements toward her. But look at these transfers. Every single one coincides with a day Leo claimed to be out meeting potential clients. Rena studied the papers, her expression growing increasingly troubled. At 28, she had an eye for detail that rivaled any forensic accountant. She'd started as my intern 5 years ago and had worked her way up to creative director through sheer talent and dedication. Ava, she said slowly, there's something I should tell you. Those client meetings Leo's been taking, I've been handling most of the follow-up communications, and several of them, they never happened. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? The Morrison project, for instance. Leo said he met with their team last month to discuss the hotel lobby redesign, but when I called to follow up on the proposal, they said they'd never heard from us. They're still waiting for our initial consultation. I stared at her, the pieces clicking into place. How many? At least 6 in the past 3 months. All meetings Leo claimed to have attended personally. Rena's voice was quiet, almost apologetic. I thought maybe there was some miscommunication, or he was playing things close to the vest until deals were finalized. I didn't want to question him directly. You should have. The words came out sharper than I intended, and I immediately regretted them. I'm sorry. This isn't your fault. If anything, I should have been paying closer attention. There's more. Rena pulled out her phone and showed me an email thread. Last week, I noticed that Leo approved several payments to vendors I didn't recognize. When I asked him about it, he said they were subcontractors for the Henderson House project. I knew the Henderson project intimately. I'd designed every room in their Tribeca townhouse personally. We didn't use any subcontractors for Henderson. I handled all the sourcing myself. That's what I thought. So I did some digging. Rena's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. Meridian Holdings LLC? It's a shell company, registered in Delaware 3 months ago. And guess who's listed as the sole proprietor? The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Leonard Caldwell, Leo. He's been funneling money from our business into his own company. The words felt like sandpaper in my throat. But why? And for what? I don't know. But Ava, if he's been doing this systematically. Rena's voice trailed off, but I could read her expression clearly. We could lose everything. I spent the rest of the morning on the phone with our bank, trying to understand the extent of the transfers. By lunch, the picture was crystal clear and devastating. Over the past 6 months, Leo had systematically moved $89,000 from Caldwell Interiors into Meridian Holdings. Money that should have gone toward our expansion plans, toward hiring additional staff, toward the security of our future. Money that was legally his to move, since we were both signatories on the business account. But morally, ethically, this was theft, plain and simple. I need to call Jonas, I told Rena, pulling up the contact information for Jonas Reed, a private investigator I'd worked with on a client case the year before. If Leo's been hiding this, God knows what else he's been hiding. Jonas answered, on the second ring. His gravelly voice, weathered by years of police work before he'd gone private, was exactly what I needed to hear. Ava Caldwell. Been a while. What can I do for you? I need you to investigate my husband, ex-husband. It's complicated. They always are. When can you come in? 2 hours later, I sat in Jonas's cramped office in Queens, the walls covered with certificates and photos from his police days. He was 60-ish, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He listened without interruption as I laid out everything: the sudden divorce, the debt payment, the mysterious transfers. So your husband waits until you pay off his debt, then immediately files for divorce, Jonas summarized, making notes in a battered notebook. And he's been moving money out of your joint business for months. That's the timeline, yes. And you suspect there's more. It wasn't a question. Jonas had clearly seen this pattern before. What do you need from me? He asked. Everything. I need to know where that money went, who he's been meeting with, whether there's someone else involved. I need to know why he waited until now to leave. I paused, the next words difficult to voice. And I need to know if our entire marriage was a lie. Jonas leaned back in his chair, studying me. This kind of investigation, it's thorough. It's also expensive. And sometimes what we find out, people wish they hadn't asked. I'm sure. All right then. He pulled out a contract from his desk drawer. I'll need a retainer of $5,000, and I'll start with the financial trail. Banking records, corporate filings, real estate transactions. If your husband's been planning this for a while, there'll be breadcrumbs. I signed the contract and wrote the check, using money from my personal account, what little was left after paying Leo's debt. How long? I asked. Give me a week for the initial report. But Ava, Jonas's expression was serious. In cases like this, the spouse who files first usually has an advantage. If you're planning to fight this legally, you need to start now. I already called my lawyer. Good, because from what you've told me, this isn't just a divorce. This is a business dissolution, possibly fraud charges, and asset recovery all rolled into one. You're going to need all the help you can get. As I drove back to Manhattan, my phone rang. Tessa's name appeared on the dashboard display. How did it go with the PI? She asked without preamble. He's on the case. Tessa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Always. Do you think I was blind? Do you think I ignored red flags because I wanted our marriage to work? There was a long pause. Ava, you're one of the smartest people I know, but you're also loyal to a fault. When you love someone, you see the best in them, even when they don't deserve it. That's not an answer. Fine. Yes. I think you ignored some things. The way Leo always managed to be traveling during our group dinners. How he talked about the business like it was his personal achievement. The way he'd change the subject whenever anyone asked about your plans for children. Another pause. But that doesn't make this your fault. Leo made calculated choices to deceive you. That's on him, not you. I pulled into the parking garage beneath our office building, my hands trembling slightly as I turned off the engine. Tessa, I think I'm going to lose everything. No, her voice was fierce, protective. You're not. We're going to fight this. Whatever Leo's planned, whatever game he's playing, we're going to beat him at it. I hope she was right. But as I rode the elevator up to the office that might soon be half his, I couldn't shake the feeling that Leo had been planning this much. longer than any of us realized, and that the worst was yet to come. Jonas called me at a.m. on a Friday morning, exactly 1 week after I'd hired him. I was already awake, staring at my laptop screen in the apartment that felt too large and too empty. I'd been reviewing contracts all night, looking for any detail I might have missed. "We need to meet," he said without preamble. "And bring your lawyer." "How bad is it?" "Worse than you thought, but not hopeless. Can you be here by 9? 2 hours later, Tessa and I sat across from Jonas in his office. He'd spread documents across his desk like a detective in a crime procedural. Bank statements, corporate filings, email printouts, photographs. "The good news," Jonas began, "is that your husband isn't as smart as he thinks he is. The bad news is that this goes deeper than simple embezzlement." He pulled out a thick folder. "Meridian Holdings LLC is just the tip of the iceberg. I found 2 other shell companies, Pinnacle Consulting and Elite Development Services, all registered in Delaware, all with Leo as the principal." Tessa leaned forward, her lawyer instincts sharpening. "What kind of money are we talking about?" "From Caldwell Interiors alone, $127,000 over the past 8 months. But that's not all." Jonas pulled out another set of documents. "Leo's been in negotiations with Hartman and Associates, you know them?" I nodded. Hartman and Associates was one of the biggest luxury real estate development firms in the city. They specialized in high-end residential and commercial projects. "He's been positioning himself as the sole owner of Caldwell Interiors," Jonas continued. "He's presented them with a proposal for an exclusive design partnership. The contract would make him their preferred interior designer for all their luxury properties." My blood turned to ice. "That's impossible. I'm half owner of the company. Any partnership deal would require my signature." Jonas's expression was grim. "About that." He slid a document across the desk. "This is a copy of the partnership agreement Leo submitted to Hartman." I stared at the familiar Caldwell Interiors letterhead, at the signature line that bore my name in what looked like my handwriting. But I'd never seen this document before in my life. "He forged my signature," I whispered. "Twice, actually," Tessa said, studying the papers. "Look at the date. This partnership proposal is dated 3 weeks ago." But here she pointed to another document. "This is a modification to your original business operating agreement, supposedly signed by you last month, which gives Leo the authority to enter into exclusive partnerships without your consent." The room felt like it was spinning. "I never signed that. I never even saw it." "I know," Jonas said. "I had a handwriting expert analyze both signatures. They're good forgeries, but they're still forgeries. The pressure patterns are wrong, and the ink analysis shows they were signed with a different pen than the rest of the document. This is fraud," Tessa said flatly. "This is criminal fraud. It gets worse." Jonas pulled out a stack of emails. "I accessed Leo's business email account legally. Since it's technically a joint business account, he's been in communication with someone named Rachel Morrison." The name hit me like a physical blow. Rachel Morrison is a lawyer. She works for Hartman and Associates. "Not just a lawyer," Jonas corrected. "She's their in-house counsel for acquisitions and partnerships. And based on these emails, she's also been sleeping with your husband for the past 4 months." The words hung in the air like poison. I felt Tessa's hand on my arm, steadying me. "The emails start in January," Jonas continued, his voice gentle but relentless. "Right around the time Leo started moving money into the shell companies. They've been planning this together, the business partnership, the divorce, everything." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. 4 months. He'd been planning this for 4 months, all while I was working overtime to pay off his debt. "There's more." Jonas pulled out printed photos. "These were taken outside Rachel Morrison's apartment building in Soho. Leo's been staying there for the past 2 weeks, since before he filed for divorce." The photos showed Leo and a blonde woman I didn't recognize. She was beautiful in a cold, corporate way, sharp suit, perfect makeup, the kind of polished professionalism that intimidated opposing counsel. In one photo, Leo's arm was around her waist as they entered her building. In another, they were kissing on the sidewalk. "So he was cheating," I said finally, my voice surprisingly steady. "And planning to steal our business. The timeline suggests he was planning to have you pay off his debt, then file for divorce and take the business," Tessa said, her voice tight with anger. "Except he got greedy and started moving money out early. The question is," Jonas said, "what do you want to do about it?" I stared at the evidence spread across his desk. financial fraud, forgery, adultery, theft. The man I'd loved and trusted for 7 years had systematically planned my destruction. I want to destroy him, I said quietly. Tessa squeezed my arm. Even though I stood up, energy coursing through me for the first time in weeks. He planned this. He used me to pay off his debt, then tried to steal everything we built together. He forged my signature and lied to major clients. He's been sleeping with another woman while I was home planning our anniversary dinner. I looked at both of them. I want to file fraud charges. I want to expose the forgeries. And I want to make sure he never works in this industry again. Jonas nodded approvingly. That's going to require a coordinated legal and public relations strategy. And it's going to get ugly. Let it get ugly. I'm done being the understanding wife. Tessa was already pulling out her phone. I'll file an emergency motion to freeze all business accounts pending investigation, and I'll prepare criminal fraud charges. What about the Hartman deal? I asked. That's the beautiful part, Jonas said with a rare smile. The contract Leo signed with them is voided by the fraud, which means you're free to approach them directly. You want me to contact the company my husband was trying to steal for me? I want you to contact them and expose exactly what Leo tried to do. Companies like Hartman and Associates don't appreciate being lied to. And they especially don't appreciate having forged documents used in negotiations. As we left Jonas's office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is David Steinberg from Steinberg and Associates. I represent Leo Caldwell. Please, call me at your earliest convenience to discuss settlement terms. I showed the text to Tessa, who snorted. Settlement terms? He's worried. Good. Should I call him? Not yet. Let's file our motions first, get the accounts frozen, and then we'll talk settlement. From a position of strength, as we walked to the subway, Tessa turned to me. Ava, I need to ask you something. Are you sure you're ready for this fight? Because, once we start, Leo's going to come at you with everything he has. He'll try to paint you as a vindictive ex-wife. He'll claim you're making false accusations. He'll try to turn your mutual friends against you. I thought about the photos of Leo with Rachel Morrison, about the forged signatures, about the 4 months of planning while I worked nights to pay his debt. Let him try, I said. I have something he doesn't. What's that? The truth. And apparently, much better lawyers. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than betrayal and hurt. I felt angry. And anger, I was learning, was much more useful than heartbreak. Leo wanted a war? He was going to get one. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing Tessa's motion to freeze the business accounts. The subject line made my breath catch. From Eli Caldwell about Leo. I stared at the sender's name for a full minute before opening it. Eli Caldwell, Leo's younger brother, the one I'd met exactly 3 times in 7 years of marriage. The one Leo always dismissed as the family disappointment or too idealistic for his own good. Ava, I heard about the divorce from a mutual friend. I also heard about some other things that don't surprise me but probably should. I think we need to talk. I have information about Leo that might be useful to you. I'm in the city tomorrow. Coffee? I'll understand if you don't want to see me guilt by association and all that, but I think you deserve to know what kind of man you married. S. I never liked Rachel Morrison either. I read the email twice, then called Tessa. Leo's brother wants to meet. I told her. He says he has information. Could be a trap. Leo might have sent him to gauge your legal strategy, or he might genuinely want to help. I thought about the few interactions I'd had with Eli over the years. He'd always been polite but distant, often skipping family gatherings. The last time I'd seen him was at Leo's father's funeral 3 years ago, where he'd given a brief, uncomfortable eulogy and left immediately after the service. What do you know about him? Tessa asked. Not much. He's an architect like Leo, but he works in sustainable design. Leo always said he was wasting his talent on feel-good projects instead of pursuing real money. They've been estranged for years. Estranged how? I tried to remember the fragments of information Leo had shared over the years, usually accompanied by dismissive comments. Something about a family business dispute. Eli left their father's firm abruptly about 5 years ago. Leo said he couldn't handle the pressure of real architecture. Or maybe he couldn't handle working with Leo, Tessa suggested. Meet him, but do it in public, and don't share any sensitive information until you know whose side he's really on. We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Tribeca, neutral territory that felt safe but private enough for conversation. I arrived 10 minutes early and claimed a corner table where I could watch the door. When Eli walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. The man scanning the calf bore only a passing resemblance to the uncomfortable, suit-wearing figure from family gatherings. This version of Eli wore dark jeans and a charcoal wool sweater, his dark hair slightly longer and less perfectly styled than Leo's. He was taller than I remembered, with broader shoulders, and there was something in his posture that suggested confidence rather than the awkward discomfort I associated with Leo's family events. Our eyes met across the room, and he smiled a genuine expression that transformed his entire face. For a moment, I saw what he might look like when he wasn't bracing himself for family criticism. Ava. He approached the table with his hand extended. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I almost didn't. I shook his hand, surprised by the calluses on his palms. Leo's hands were always perfectly smooth, but curiosity won out. I'm glad. He settled into the chair across from me, and I noticed his eyes the same dark brown as Leo's but somehow warmer, more direct. I wasn't sure you'd remember me. Of course I remember you. Though I have to admit, I don't know much about you beyond the basics. That's Leo's doing, I'm sure. He's always been good at controlling narratives. Eli's smile turned rueful. What? Did he tell you about why I left the family business? That you couldn't handle the pressure? That you were too idealistic for commercial architecture? Eli laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's one way to put it. The truth is, I left because I discovered Leo was billing clients for materials we never ordered and pocketing the difference. When I confronted him about it, he accused me of trying to sabotage his career out of jealousy. My stomach dropped. How long ago was this? 5 years ago, right around the time you two were launching Caldwell Interiors. He paused, studying my expression. I tried to tell our father what was happening, but Leo convinced him I was making false accusations to position myself as the heir apparent. Dad chose Leo's version of events, so you left. I left. Started my own firm focusing on sustainable residential design. Leo told everyone I couldn't compete in the real market, so I retreated to hippie architecture. Eli's fingers made air quotes, and I could hear Leo's dismissive tone in the gesture. But you're successful now, I said, remembering fragments of conversations. Leo mentioned you won some kind of design award last year, the AIA National Award for Sustainable Design. Yes. For a housing project that's been featured in Architectural Digest and copied by developers across the country. His tone wasn't boastful, just matter of fact. Leo's never acknowledged it. The waitress appeared and we ordered coffee. When she left, Eli leaned forward slightly. Ava, I need you to know that I saw what was happening in your marriage. At family gatherings, the way Leo talked about the business like it was his personal achievement. The way he'd change the subject whenever anyone asked about your role. I wanted to say something, but it wasn't your place. But I was a coward, he corrected. I'd already been labeled the troublemaker, the jealous brother. I told myself it wasn't my business. I studied his face, looking for deception or hidden agenda. Instead, I found something I hadn't expected, genuine regret. Why now? I asked. Why reach out now? Because when I heard about the divorce, I knew it wasn't coincidental. Leo doesn't do anything without a plan. And when my mother mentioned that he'd been smart to secure the business before filing, Eli's jaw tightened. I realized he was doing to you what he tried to do to me. Your mother knows about his plans? My mother orchestrated half of them. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. Margot Caldwell has spent 30 years polishing Leo's image and covering up his mistakes. She sees you as a threat to the family reputation. What kind of threat? The kind that might expose what Leo really is. Our coffee arrived, and Eli wrapped his hands around his mug like he was drawing warmth from it. There's something else you should know. The woman Leo's been seeing, Rachel Morrison, she's not just random. My mother introduced them at a charity gala 6 months ago. Rachel's father is a major investor in luxury developments, and Margot saw an opportunity to expand Leo's business connections. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. So this was arranged? I don't know if the affair was planned, but the introduction was strategic. Margot's always viewed relationships as business opportunities. He met my eyes. She never approved of you, Ava. You weren't connected enough, wealthy enough, or pliable enough for her tastes. Pliable? Someone who would support Leo's ambitions. without having opinions of her own. Someone who would be grateful to be included in the Caldwell legacy instead of trying to build something separate. I thought about the countless family dinners where Margot had asked pointed questions about my little design hobby or wondered aloud when Leo and I planned to start a family so I could focus on what really matters. She's going to come after me, isn't she? Eli nodded grimly. She'll try to pressure you into a quiet settlement. She'll use every social and professional connection she has to isolate you. And if that doesn't work, she'll try to destroy your reputation. Let her try. The words came out harder than I'd intended. I have evidence of Leo's fraud. I have documentation of his forgeries. I'm not the same woman who used to smile politely. At her insults, something shifted in Eli's expression, surprise, perhaps, or approval. Good, because you're going to need that strength. Will you help me? The question surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise him. Help you how? You know Leo better than anyone except maybe your mother. You know how he thinks, how he operates. You understand the family dynamics. I leaned forward. And you have access to information I don't. Eli was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee mug slowly in his hands. If I help you, it'll mean choosing sides against my family permanently. My mother will never forgive me. Leo will see it as the ultimate betrayal. And I should have chosen sides years ago. He looked up, his expression resolved. What do you need? Margot Caldwell arrived at my apartment unannounced on Thursday afternoon, dressed in what I'd come to think of as her intimidation uniform, a tailored black Chanel suit, perfectly styled silver hair, and the kind of understated jewelry that costs more than most people's cars. She swept past me into my living room like she owned the place. Ava, darling, we need to chat. I closed the door slowly, buying myself time to process her presence. In 7 years of marriage, Margot had visited my home exactly once, for our wedding reception. She'd spent that evening making subtle criticisms of everything from the catering to the flower arrangements, all delivered with the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Margot, this is unexpected. I'm sure it is. She settled onto my sofa without being invited, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. May I have some tea? This conversation may take a while. I don't think Earl Grey, if you have it, or chamomile. Nothing decaffeinated. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I found myself moving toward the kitchen, then stopped abruptly. This was exactly the kind of power play Margot excelled at, walking into someone else's space and immediately taking control of the situation. I'm not making you tea, Margot. Say what you came to say. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows rose slightly. My, you have developed some spine, haven't you? How refreshing. I remained standing, arms crossed. What do you want? To help you, of course. To prevent you from making a terrible mistake that will hurt everyone involved. She patted the cushion beside her. Please sit. Let's discuss this like civilized women. I'll stand. Margot sighed, the sound carrying decades of theatrical disappointment. Very well, Ava. I understand you're hurt. Divorce is always traumatic, especially when one feels blindsided. But pursuing these allegations against Leo will only make things worse for everyone. What allegations? Don't play coy, dear. I know about the private investigator. I know about the lawyers. I know you're claiming Leo stole money from your little design business. She waved her hand dismissively. It's all very sordid in public, and frankly, beneath you. The casual way she said little design business made my jaw clench. Caldwell Interiors had brought in over $2 million in revenue last year. But to Margot, anything that wasn't inherited wealth was inconsequential. It's not an allegation. It's documented fraud. Oh, darling. Margot's laugh was like crystal breaking. You really think you can take on the Caldwell name and win? You think your middle-class connections and night school law degree can compete with our family's resources? Tessa graduated from Harvard Law, actually, summa cum laude. How nice for her. But Ava, you're missing the bigger picture. This isn't about legal degrees or evidence or who's right and who's wrong. This is about power and influence and reputation. Things you've never had to navigate. I felt my pulse quickening, but I kept my voice level. What exactly are you proposing? Margot opened her designer handbag and pulled out a folder. Leo has authorized me to offer you a very generous settlement. You'll receive your initial investment in the business, what was it? $50,000, plus an additional $100,000 for your pain and suffering. In return, you'll sign a non-disclosure agreement and refrain from making any public statements about your marriage or the divorce. I stared at her. $150,000. It's quite generous, considering the circumstances. The circumstances being that my half of the business is worth over $2 million. Margot's smile didn't waver. Your half of the business exists only on paper, dear. Leo's been the driving force behind all major client relationships. The Caldwell name opens doors. Your contribution, while I'm sure you found it fulfilling, was always supplementary. The casual dismissal of 7 years of work hit me like a physical blow. I thought of every late night I'd spent perfecting designs, every client meeting where I'd presented concepts that Leo later claimed credit for, every networking event where I'd charmed potential clients who then became Leo's conquests. Supplementary, I repeated. Don't take it personally. Many wives contribute to their husbands' businesses in small ways. It's admirable, really. But now it's time to move forward with dignity. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app, hitting record before setting it on the coffee table between us. What are you doing? Margot asked, her composure slipping slightly. Creating a record of this conversation. Please, continue explaining how my contributions were supplementary. Margot's eyes hardened. Turn that off. No, Ava, you're making a mistake. The Caldwell family has connections throughout this industry. We can make sure you never work in interior design again. We can destroy your reputation so thoroughly that no respectable client will ever hire you. Is that a threat, Margot? It's a reality check. You came from nothing, darling. A little ranch house in Queens, public schools, a mother who worked at Macy's. Leo lifted you up, gave you access to a world you never could have entered on your own. The least you can do is show some gratitude. The mask was fully off now. The polished society matron had been replaced by something colder, more calculating. You know what I think? I picked up my phone, making sure it was still recording. I think you're scared. I think you know exactly what Leo did, and you're terrified that when it comes out, it'll reflect badly on your precious family name. Don't be ridiculous. I think you knew about Rachel Morrison. I think you orchestrated the introduction because you saw an opportunity to trade up a daughter-in-law with better connections and fewer inconvenient opinions. Margot stood abruptly, her composure cracking. You little. What? What am I, Margot? Say it for the recording. For a moment, I thought she might actually finish the sentence. Her face was flushed, her perfectly controlled mask slipping entirely. Then she seemed to remember herself. This conversation is over. She snatched up her handbag. You have 24 hours to accept Leo's offer. After that, the terms become much less generous. Tell Leo his offer is insulting. Tell him if he wants to negotiate, he can do it through proper legal channels, with full disclosure of all assets and business dealings. You're making an enemy of the wrong family, Ava. No, I said, following her to the door. I'm finally standing up to the right one. After she left, I sat in my living room listening to the recording. Margot's threats were clear. Her dismissal of my contributions documented, her admission that she could destroy my reputation preserved in digital clarity. I called Eli first. She just left. I told him, your mother just offered me $150,000 to disappear quietly. Christ, what did you tell her? I told her the offer was insulting. But Eli, she threatened to destroy my reputation. She said the family has connections throughout the industry. She does. But Ava, you have something she doesn't. What's that? The truth. And people in this industry value talent more than they value social connections. Your work speaks for itself. I recorded the conversation. There was a pause. All of it, every word, including her threats and her admission that she can make sure I never work again. Send it to me. And Ava, you just gave us exactly what we need to fight back. The Hartman and Associates conference room was everything I'd expected from one of Manhattan's premier development firms. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, a glass table that could seat 20, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted about money. I sat at one end of that table, flanked by Tessa and Jonas, facing 5 of Hartman's executives including CEO Michael Hartman himself. At the other end sat Leo and his lawyer David Steinberg, with Rachel Morrison positioned strategically beside them as both legal counsel and, I now knew, co-conspirator. Thank you all for coming, Michael Hartman began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to controlling multi-million-dollar deals. We're here to discuss the partnership proposal submitted by Caldwell Interiors and address some concerns that have been raised about the legitimacy of that proposal. Leo looked confident, almost relaxed, his perfectly tailored suit and practiced smile suggesting a man without a care in the world. He'd always been good at presentations, at projecting success and certainty even when privately struggling. But I noticed small tells: the way he kept glancing at Rachel, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed silently against his thigh. Rachel Morrison, on the other hand, looked every inch the polished corporate attorney. Blonde hair pulled back in a flawless chignon, navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and the kind of cool confidence that came from years of winning battles in boardrooms exactly like this one. Before we begin, I said, standing and pulling out a folder, I'd like to present some evidence that I believe is relevant to this discussion. David Steinberg immediately objected. This isn't a trial, Miss Caldwell. We're here to discuss business matters, not air personal grievances. These aren't personal grievances, Tessa replied smoothly. These are documented instances of fraud, forgery, and misrepresentation that directly impact any business relationship with my client's company. Michael Hartman held up a hand. Let's hear what Miss Caldwell has to say. I activated the projection system and connected my laptop. The first document that appeared on the wall screen was the partnership agreement Leo had submitted to Hartman, the one bearing my forged signature. This is the partnership proposal that Leo Caldwell submitted to your company, I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. It bears my signature and purports to give him the authority to enter into exclusive partnerships. On behalf of Caldwell Interiors, Leo started to speak, but I continued. However, I never signed this document. I never even saw it until my private investigator obtained a copy. I clicked to the next slide, the handwriting analysis Jonas had commissioned. As you can see, forensic analysis confirms that my signature was forged. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Rachel's face had gone pale, but Leo maintained his composure. Furthermore, I continued, clicking to the next slide, Mr. Caldwell has been systematically embezzling money from Caldwell Interiors to fund shell companies he established without my knowledge or consent. The screen now showed bank transfer records, the steady flow of money from our business account to Meridian Holdings and the other entities Leo had created. Over the past 8 months, he's stolen $127,000 from our joint business while simultaneously planning to exclude me from any future partnership deals. This is outrageous, David Steinberg sputtered. These are unsubstantiated allegations, they're documented facts, Jonas interrupted, standing and handing copies of the evidence to each person at the table. Bank records, corporate filings, email communications, all obtained through legal channels and verified by independent experts. Michael Hartman was studying the documents with the kind of focused attention that had probably made him very rich. His colleagues were doing the same, occasionally exchanging meaningful glances. There's more, I said, clicking to the next slide. This one showed email threads between Leo and Rachel, carefully selected excerpts that demonstrated their collaboration. In planning the partnership deal, Rachel Morrison was no longer pale. She was red-faced and looking like she wanted to disappear through the floor. As you can see, Mr. Caldwell and Miss Morrison have been coordinating this proposal for months, with full knowledge that the authorization documents were fraudulent. Leo finally spoke. Ava, you're clearly upset about our divorce, but trying to sabotage legitimate business relationships. Leo, I turned to face him directly. Stop talking. The simple command seemed to catch him off guard. For 7 years, I'd been the accommodating partner, the one who smoothed over his mistakes and supported his ambitions. This version of me, direct, authoritative, uncompromising, was new territory. You forged my signature. You stole from our business. You lied to these people about your authority to act on behalf of Caldwell Interiors. And you did all of this while I was working overtime to pay off your personal debt. I let that sink in for a moment. So please, by all means, keep talking. I'm sure Mr. Hartman would love to hear more about your business ethics. Michael Hartman cleared his throat. Miss Morrison, I think you should recuse yourself from this discussion. Rachel stood quickly, gathering her papers. Of course, I'll be in my office if you need anything. She practically fled the room, leaving Leo without his legal and personal support system. Now then, Michael continued, it seems we have a situation that needs clarification. Mr. Caldwell, these allegations are quite serious. They're the desperate lies of a bitter ex-wife, Leo said, but his voice lacked conviction. The forensic evidence suggests otherwise, Tessa interjected. And I should mention that criminal charges are being filed against Mr. Caldwell for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Leo's composure finally cracked. You can't be serious. Deadly serious, I said. You wanted to cut me out of the business we built together? You wanted to steal from our company to fund your affair and your exit strategy? Congratulations, Leo. You've succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. You're now completely cut out of the business, and you're facing criminal charges. I turned back to Michael Hartman. Caldwell Interiors is very interested in partnering with Hartman and Associates. However, any such partnership would be with me as the sole proprietor, following the completion of our business dissolution proceedings. And the quality of work? The design capabilities? One of the other executives asked. I smiled for the first time in the entire meeting. I'm glad you asked. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a portfolio of Caldwell Interiors' most successful projects. These are the designs I personally created for our major clients over the past 5 years. As you can see, the aesthetic vision and creative execution that made Caldwell Interiors successful has always come from me. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through project after project, explaining design concepts, client relationships, and creative processes. I watched their expressions shift from skepticism to interest to genuine enthusiasm. The Hartman partnership would allow me to expand into commercial and luxury residential development while maintaining the creative integrity that's made my work successful, I concluded. Michael Hartman was nodding slowly. This is quite a presentation, Miss Caldwell. Quite a revelation, actually. Leo made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Michael, surely you can't seriously consider doing business with someone who's clearly emotionally unstable, Mr. Caldwell. Michael's voice was ice cold. I suggest you leave my offices immediately, before I have security escort you out. Leo stared at him, then at me, finally understanding that his charm and manipulation had no power here. This isn't over, Ava. Yes, it is, I replied calmly. It's completely over. As Leo and his lawyer gathered their materials and left, Michael Hartman turned to me with something that might have been admiration. Miss Caldwell, assuming the legal proceedings resolve in your favor, Hartman and Associates would be very interested in discussing a partnership with your firm. I look forward to that conversation, I said, walking out of that building, flanked by Tessa and Jonas. I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete, uncompromising victory. Judge Patricia Williams had granted our motion for access to Leo's private office space on the 42nd floor of the Chrysler Building, where he maintained what he called his executive suite, a pretentious name for what was essentially a small office he'd rented to impress clients who might be put off by our more modest shared workspace in Tribeca. Eli and I stood outside the office door at M on a Tuesday morning, accompanied by a court-appointed observer and Jonas, who'd brought professional-grade document scanning equipment. The locksmith finished his work and stepped aside, leaving us facing the mahogany door that had always represented Leo's private domain. You sure you want to do this? Eli asked quietly. There might be things in there you'd rather not see, like, what? More evidence of his affair? More proof that he's been lying to me for years? I turned the handle and pushed open the door. I'm way past protecting my feelings, Eli. The office was exactly what I'd expected from Leo's sense of style: dark wood furniture, leather chairs, expensive artwork that looked impressive but lacked any real personality. It was the kind of space designed to project success rather than facilitate actual work. But it was the wall safe behind a Rothko reproduction that interested me most. Court order covers that too, Jonas said, following my gaze. Judge Williams was very thorough. The locksmith made quick work of the safe, revealing stacks of documents, several USB drives, and a leather-bound ledger that looked like something from a 1950 seconds accounting office. I pulled out the ledger first, flipping through pages of handwritten entries in Leo's distinctive script. Names, dates, amounts, and cryptic abbreviations that clearly meant something to him but looked like code to me. What is this? I murmured, studying the entries. Eli looked over my shoulder, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something clean and understated, completely different from Leo's expensive, cloying preferences. It looks like a record. of payments, he said, but not the kind you'd put through official books. Jonas was photographing everything with professional efficiency, but I could see his eyes sharpening as he scanned the pages. Ava, look at this entry from 6 months ago. Emke, Sterling Properties $25,000 consulting fee. Emke, I repeated. Margot Caldwell? Has to be, Eli said grimly. And Sterling Properties is one of the companies my mother invests in through her trust fund. I flipped back through earlier pages, finding more entries with the Emke initials. Always large amounts, always described as consulting fees or advisory payments. He's been paying your mother, I said, the implications sinking in. But for what? Keep reading, Jonas suggested. 3 pages later, I found the answer. A detailed entry from 8 months ago. Emke, RM. Introduction $15,000 H and a partnership setup. Rachel Morrison. I breathed. He paid his mother $15,000 to introduce him to Rachel, which means Margot was financially invested in Leo's plan to steal your business, Eli said, his voice tight with anger. She wasn't just covering for him, she was profiting from it. Jonas had moved to Leo's computer, which the court order also covered. Password protected, but I've got software for this. He plugged in a device that looked like a high-tech USB drive. Give me 20 minutes. While Jonas worked on the computer, Eli and I continued through the safe's contents. USB drives labeled with dates and project names, many of which I didn't recognize. Legal documents for companies I'd never heard of. And most damning of all, a folder labeled Exit Strategy that contained detailed plans for Leo's departure from our marriage and business. Jesus, I whispered, reading through the timeline he'd mapped out. He's been planning this for over a year. The documents showed a methodical approach to betrayal. Bank account openings, shell company registrations, meetings with lawyers, even a detailed analysis of New York's divorce laws and asset division requirements. Look at this, Eli said, pointing to a particular page. He researched how to minimize your claim to the business. He consulted with 3 different attorneys before choosing Steinberg, but it was the final document in the folder that made my blood run cold. A handwritten note in Leo's script. A. Will likely fight initial settlement. Prepared to offer up to $300,000 to avoid criminal charges. Mother's reputation management budget approved for $500,000 if necessary to discredit A's claims. Reputation management budget, I said slowly. Your mother was prepared to spend $500,000 to destroy my credibility. Eli was silent, reading over my shoulder. Finally, he spoke. I'm sorry, Ava. I knew my family was cold. But this is criminal conspiracy, Jonas said, looking up from the computer. And I've got more evidence. Leo's email archives go back 3 years, and he kept detailed records of every conversation with your mother-in-law. What kind of conversations? Strategy sessions. She was his primary advisor on the business theft and the divorce proceedings. She recommended attorneys, suggested ways to hide assets, and yes, she specifically suggested that paying off his debt first would make you less likely to suspect his real motives. The betrayal was so comprehensive, so calculated, that I actually felt impressed by its scope. They'd thought of everything except the possibility that I might fight back effectively. There's more, Jonas continued. Leo's been documenting other questionable business deals over the years. Overbilling clients, using substandard materials while charging for premium, kickbacks from vendors. And according to these emails, your mother-in-law has been aware of all of it. She's been covering for him his entire career, Eli said, using family connections and social pressure to smooth over his mistakes. I thought about every interaction I'd had with Margot over the years, every subtle put-down and dismissive comment. She hadn't just disapproved of me, she'd seen me as a threat to a system that allowed Leo to operate with impunity. What's the statute of limitations on fraud in New York? I asked Jonas. Depends on the specific charges, but for most financial crimes, it's 5 years from discovery. He grinned, which means everything in this ledger is fair game, so we can prosecute both of them. Leo, definitely. Your mother-in-law is trickier. Conspiracy charges would require proving she knew the specific illegal acts were being committed, not just that she was giving general advice. But the reputation management budget? Eli asked. Planning to discredit Ava's claims? That could be obstruction of justice if we can prove she actually implemented the plan. I closed the ledger and looked around Leo's private office, his sanctuary of secrets and schemes. For years, I'd respected his privacy, trusted his explanations for why certain business matters needed to be handled delicately or off the books. I'd been so focused on building our business that I'd missed the signs that my husband was systematically looting it. I want to call Tessa, I said. I want to file additional charges against Leo, and I want to explore what we can do about Margot, Ava. Eli said quietly. Are you sure? Going after my mother. It's going to get uglier than you can imagine. She has resources and connections that Leo doesn't. She'll come at you with everything she has. I looked at the man who had become my unlikely ally, whose family loyalty had shifted from blood to justice over the past few weeks. There was something in his eyes, concern, yes, but also admiration for my willingness to fight. Let her come, I said. I'm not the same woman who used to smile politely at her insults. I'm not the same woman who trusted blindly and asked no questions. No, Eli agreed, his voice softer. You're not. The moment stretched between us, charged with recognition and something else, something that had been building since our first coffee meeting. I was suddenly aware of how close we were standing, how his presence had become a source of strength, rather than just strategic advantage. Jonas, clearing his throat, broke the spell. Should I call your lawyer, or do you want to do the honors? I'll call her, I said, stepping back from Eli but not breaking eye contact. It's time to finish what Leo started. As I dialed Tessa's number, I realized that what had begun as a fight for financial survival had become something larger. I wasn't just reclaiming my business or seeking justice for Leo's betrayal. I was redefining who I could be when I stopped accepting other people's limitations on my worth, and judging by the way Eli was looking at me, I wasn't the only one who'd noticed the transformation. The champagne flute trembled slightly in my hand as I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of our new headquarters in Soho. Below, photographers and journalists were setting up for the relaunch event that would introduce Meridian Design Studio to the world, a deliberate reclaiming of the name Leo had tried to steal, transformed into something entirely my own. Nervous? Rena appeared at my side, resplendent in the midnight blue dress we'd chosen for tonight. As my new creative partner and co-director, she'd thrown herself into the rebrand with an enthusiasm that reminded me why I'd promoted her. Terrified, I admitted. 6 months ago, I was planning anniversary dinners and paying off debt. Now I'm about to go public with the biggest professional gamble of my life. It's not a gamble when you're this prepared, Tessa said, joining us with her own glass of champagne. The Hartman partnership alone guarantees you 18 months of premium projects. The Brooklyn Museum contract puts you on the cultural map. And after that Architectural Digest feature last month, people are calling. I finished. I know. It still feels surreal. The past 4 months had passed in a blur of legal proceedings, business restructuring, and more media attention than I'd ever imagined. Leo's criminal trial for fraud and embezzlement had made the business pages of every major newspaper, but instead of damaging my reputation, the coverage had positioned me as the wronged party who'd fought back brilliantly. The Times wants an interview next week, Rena said. Something about women in business who've overcome betrayal. They're calling you the interior designer who refused to be erased. That's dramatic. That's accurate, Eli said, appearing behind me with the kind of quiet confidence that had become wonderfully familiar. He wore a charcoal suit that complemented his architect's eye for clean lines, and when he smiled at me, I felt the same flutter of attraction that had been growing stronger each day. How do I look? I asked, gesturing to the emerald green dress I'd chosen for tonight, bold, elegant, and nothing like the conservative styles I'd worn as Leo's wife, like someone who could redesign the entire city if she wanted to, he said, his eyes warm with approval. Smooth talker, I accused, but I was smiling. Just honest. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Ready to show the world what you've built. The space around us was proof of what focused vision and unlimited creative freedom could accomplish. Where Caldwell Interiors had been traditional and safe, Meridian Design Studio was bold and innovative. Exposed brick walls showcased rotating art installations from local artists. Sustainable materials and biophilic design elements created an environment that felt both professional and nurturing. Most importantly, every design choice reflected my authentic aesthetic rather than compromises made to appeal to Leo's traditional tastes. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonas called from across the room. Your public awaits. The main floor had been transformed into a gallery space showcasing our recent projects. The Hartman residential tower model occupied the center of the room. It's luxury apartments designed around the principle that sustainability and elegance weren't mutually exclusive. Around the perimeter, photographs and materials displays told the story of each project, from the Brooklyn Museum's new contemporary wing to the affordable housing complex in Queens that had become a model for community-centered design. As guests began arriving, I recognized faces from across the industry. Former clients who'd followed me from Caldwell Interiors, journalists who'd covered the legal drama with keen interest, potential partners who'd been waiting to see if I could build something lasting from the rubble of my marriage. Ava Caldwell, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, approached, extending her hand. Patricia Chen from Metropolitan Home. I've been following your story. What aspects interest you most? I asked, falling into the rhythm of networking that had once felt like performance but now felt natural. The business transformation, obviously, but also the personal journey. It's rare to see someone turn a devastating betrayal into such a clear vision for moving forward. I had excellent advisors, I said, glancing toward Tessa and Eli, who were deep in conversation with Michael Hartman. And I learned that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted reveals what you actually need, which was creative control, business partnerships based on mutual respect rather than emotional manipulation, the freedom to build something that reflects my values rather than someone else's limitations. Patricia Chen scribbled notes with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found a compelling story. And the personal cost? The divorce proceedings were quite public. The personal cost of staying would have been higher, I said simply. I spent 7 years editing myself to fit someone else's vision of who I should be. The relief of being authentically myself is worth every difficult moment of this transition. As the evening progressed, I found myself moving through conversations with growing confidence. The Meridian Design Studio story was compelling because it was true. A woman who'd refused to accept financial and creative erasure, who'd fought back systematically and won. Ava, the voice made me freeze mid-conversation with a potential client. I turned to find Rachel Morrison standing behind me, looking polished but tense in a way that suggested this wasn't a social visit. Rachel, this is unexpected. Could we speak privately for a moment? I excused myself from the conversation and led her to a quiet corner of the space, aware that Eli was tracking our movement from across the room. I wanted to apologize, Rachel said without preamble, for my role in what Leo did to you. I know, that doesn't fix anything but you're facing professional consequences and thought an apology might help, I suggested. Rachel's cheek flushed. I've been suspended from Hartman and Associates pending an ethics investigation. The New York State Bar Association is reviewing my conduct. My legal career might be over. I'm sorry to hear that, and surprisingly, I was. Rachel had made terrible choices, but she'd also been manipulated by Leo's charm and Margot's strategic thinking. Leo never told me you weren't aware of the partnership negotiations, she continued. He said you were being difficult about the terms but that you'd come around eventually. I thought I was helping to smooth over a business disagreement, not participating in fraud. Did you know about the forged signatures? Not until after they were submitted. By then, I was. She trailed off. In too deep, I finished. Personally and professionally, yes. Rachel met my eyes for the first time. I know this sounds self-serving, but I genuinely admired your work. The designs you presented to our board last month were extraordinary. I wish we could have worked together. Under different circumstances, maybe we still can, I said, surprising myself with the offer. When your legal situation resolves, if you're interested in moving toward ethical practice, Meridian Design Studio might have consulting opportunities for someone with your development experience. Rachel stared at me. You'd consider working with me? After everything? I'd consider working with the version of you that chose to apologize tonight rather than staying away, I said. Leo didn't just manipulate me, Rachel. He manipulated you too. The difference is you're here trying to make amends. After Rachel left, Eli appeared with 2 fresh glasses of champagne. That was generous, he observed, or naive. Strategic, he corrected. Rachel Morrison has connections throughout the luxury development world. If she rebuilds her reputation under your guidance, she could be a valuable ally. You sound like a business consultant. I sound like someone who's been watching you navigate complex relationships and rebuild your professional life with remarkable skill. His tone was warm, admiring. I'm proud of you, Ava. The simple statement hit me with unexpected force. When Had anyone last said they were proud of me? Leo had always focused on what I could do better, how I could be more useful to his ambitions. Thank you, I said softly. There's something else. Eli's expression grew more serious. I heard from my mother's lawyer today. My stomach tightened. Margot had been conspicuously absent from public view since the criminal charges were filed, but I knew she was planning something. People like Margot Caldwell didn't simply retreat from battles they'd helped instigate. What did she want? To propose a settlement. She'll provide testimony against Leo in exchange for immunity from prosecution for her role in the conspiracy. Can she do that? Legally? Yes. She's valuable to the prosecution because she can provide details about Leo's financial crimes going back years. Her cooperation could put him away for a significant sentence. I considered this development, studying Eli's conflicted expression. How do you feel about your mother testifying against your brother? Honestly, relieved. This family has protected Leo's worst impulses for too long. Maybe facing real consequences will force him to take responsibility for his choices. And Margot? Do you think she's genuinely accepting responsibility, or just cutting her losses? Eli's smile was rueful. My mother has never genuinely accepted responsibility for anything in her life. But if her testimony helps put Leo away and protects you from further harassment, I'll take it. The event was winding down, but the success was undeniable. Business cards had been exchanged, partnerships discussed, and the foundation laid for Meridian Design Studios' next phase of growth. So, Rena said, joining us as the last guests filtered out, ready to admit this was a triumph. It was a beginning, I corrected, but I was smiling. The real test comes when we deliver on all these promises. We will, she said confidently. We have the talent, the resources, and most importantly, we have leadership that actually knows what it's doing. As the cleaning crew began breaking down the gallery displays, I stood in the center of my new space and allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. 6 months ago, I'd been financially devastated and professionally erased. Tonight, I'd launched a business that reflected my authentic vision, surrounded by people who respected my capabilities rather than merely tolerating my contributions. What are you thinking? Eli asked, finding me in my moment of reflection. That I should have done this years ago. You weren't ready years ago. You needed to understand what you were fighting for, not just what you were fighting against. When did you become so wise? When I started paying attention to the woman who transformed betrayal into empowerment, he said, stepping closer. When I realized that watching you rebuild your life was teaching me how to rebuild mine, the space between us seemed charged with possibility, with the recognition that our alliance had become something deeper. But before either of us could acknowledge it directly, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Need to see you. It's about the offshore accounts. Tomorrow, p.m., Meridian Coffee on Spring Street. Come alone. Lee showed the message to Eli, whose expression darkened. He's not supposed to contact you directly. The restraining order is still in effect. I finished. But if he has information about hidden assets, I need to hear it. It's a trap, Ava. Maybe. But it's also an opportunity. I looked around the space that represented everything I'd built from the wreckage of my marriage. I'm not the same woman Leo married. If he wants to play one more game, let's finish it. Meridian Coffee on Spring Street was the kind of aggressively hip establishment that served $12 lattes and catered to the creative professionals who'd made Soho their professional home. I arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table where I could observe the entire space while keeping my back to the wall, a precaution that felt both necessary and absurd. Leo entered precisely at p.m., his timing as meticulous as ever. But the man who approached my table bore little resemblance to the confident manipulator who'd left our apartment 6 months ago. His expensive suits had been replaced by off-the-rack clothing. His perfectly styled hair showed gray roots that suggested he could no longer afford his usual colorist. Most tellingly, his characteristic arrogance had been replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. Ava, thank you for coming. I'm here for 5 minutes, Leo. Talk. He settled into the chair across from me, his movements careful and calculated. You look good. Success suits you. Flattery isn't going to work. What do you want? To make a deal? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I have information about assets that weren't disclosed during the divorce proceedings, accounts in the Cayman Islands, investments in European real estate, cryptocurrency wallets. Approximately $2.3 million that technically belongs to both of us. My expression didn't change, but internally I was calculating. The money he was describing would represent a significant windfall, enough to fully capitalize Meridian Design Studios' expansion plans. In exchange for what? A letter to the judge, something that acknowledges my cooperation in asset recovery and requests leniency in sentencing. He paused, studying my face. I'm not asking you to lie, just to confirm that I'm providing valuable assistance in resolving our financial matters. You want me to help reduce your prison sentence. I want you to help me avoid a lengthy prison sentence. There's a difference. I sipped my coffee, buying time to think. Leo had always been skilled at presenting partial truths in ways that served his interests, but this felt different, more desperate, more genuine. Why now? You've had months to disclose these assets, because I thought I could salvage something from this situation without your involvement. I was wrong. His admission came reluctantly, as if the words tasted bitter. My mother's testimony has made it clear that I'm facing serious jail time. My legal fees have exhausted most of my liquid assets. And Rachel? Rachel what? Rachel's cooperation with the prosecution includes detailed information about our communications. She's documented every conversation we had about business strategy, every plan we made to minimize your role in the company. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The woman I thought was helping me build a future has provided the evidence that's going to destroy me. Karma's efficient that way. I deserve that. He met my eyes directly, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine regret. I deserve all of this, actually. But Ava, I need you to understand something about why I did what I did. Because you're selfish and you thought you could get away with it? Because I was terrified that you'd realize you were better than me. The words came out in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back for months. You were always the talented one, the creative force behind our success. I was just management. And every year, you got stronger and more confident, and I became more afraid that you'd figure out you didn't need me. I stared at him, processing this admission. So you decided to steal from me before I could leave you? I decided to secure my position before you realized you didn't want to share it with me anymore. He rubbed his face with hands that seemed older than I remembered. I convinced myself that I was protecting what we'd built together, but really, I was just protecting myself from being discarded. I never would have discarded you, Leo. I loved you. I know. That's what makes this so. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Unforgivable, stupid, unnecessarily cruel, self-defeating. He straightened in his chair, seemingly gathering whatever composure he had left. But it's done, and I can't undo it. What I can do is provide you with information that will give you access to money that's legally yours. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app, setting it on the table between us. If you're serious about cooperation, let's document this properly. Leo stared at the phone, then nodded. The primary account is at Cayman National Bank, account number 7439X2E847. The access codes are in a safety deposit box at Chase Manhattan. Box 1247. The key is taped under the drawer of my desk in the Chrysler Building office. The office that's been sealed by court order? Your lawyer can get access with proper documentation. The judge has already established that hidden assets are subject to recovery. He paused. There's also a cryptocurrency wallet with approximately 400,000 in Bitcoin. The access information is in the same safety deposit box. I made notes as he spoke, documenting every detail. What else? Property in Tuscany, purchased through a shell company. A vineyard outside of Florence that's been appreciating steadily. It's currently worth about 800,000 euros. Purchased with money stolen from our business? Purchased with money I diverted from business accounts, yes. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully, perhaps aware that anything he said could be used in criminal proceedings. Leo, I said slowly, why are you really doing this? Because I don't buy that you're suddenly overcome with remorse. He was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in slow circles on the table. Because I saw the pictures from your relaunch event, he said finally. I saw how you looked, how confident and successful and happy. I realized that you'd built something extraordinary from what I tried to destroy, and I wanted to be the kind of person who could appreciate that instead of resenting it. And I realized that the only decent thing I could do was give you the resources to make it even better. I studied his face, looking for deception or manipulation. Instead, I found something I'd never seen before in Leo's expressions: genuine accountability. What about your mother? Is she aware you're here? My mother is focused on saving herself. She's been quite clear that my choices are my responsibility to bear. His smile was bitter. Apparently, I'm only useful to the Caldwell family when I'm successful. Facing criminal charges makes me a liability to be managed rather than an asset, to be protected. How does that feel? Like justice, honestly. I spent 35 years letting my mother shield me from consequences. Maybe if I'd faced some accountability earlier, I wouldn't have thought I could steal from my wife and get away with it. The conversation was approaching its natural conclusion, but I had one more question. Do you regret the affair, or just getting caught? Leo considered this carefully. I regret using Rachel as an escape from problems I should have addressed directly with you. I regret that my cowardice and selfishness hurt multiple people. And I regret that I was too insecure to appreciate what we had while we still had it. That's not really an answer. The affair was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was my inability to believe I deserved the life we were building together. He met my eyes. I'm sorry, Ava, for all of it. You deserved better than the husband I was, and you deserved better than the person I became. I turned off the recording and slipped my phone back into my purse. I'll discuss the asset recovery with my lawyer. If the information you've provided is accurate and complete, I'll consider writing a letter that acknowledges your cooperation. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Whether or not I write that letter depends on whether you're telling the truth about having disclosed everything. I am. There's nothing else, Ava. What I've told you represents everything I hid during our marriage. I stood to leave, then paused. Leo, for what it's worth, I hope you use your time in prison to figure out who you want to be when you get out. Because the man who just apologized to me, he's someone I could have respected. The man who just apologized to you is who I should have been all along. Walking away from that coffee shop, I felt something unexpected: closure. Not forgiveness. Leo's actions had been too calculated and cruel for that, but a sense that this chapter of my life was finally, definitively closed. The asset recovery would take months to complete, but Tessa was confident that we'd be able to access the hidden accounts and properties. More importantly, I'd gained something I hadn't expected: confirmation that my instincts about Leo's character had been correct. He was capable of remorse and accountability, but only after facing consequences that made denial impossible. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. How did it go? Are you okay? I typed back. Better than expected. Meet me at the office? I have news. His response was immediate. On my way. As I walked through the Soho streets toward Meridian Design Studio, I realized that Leo's revelations had given me more than just access to hidden money. They'd given me the final piece of my transformation from victim to victor, from someone who'd been betrayed to someone who'd systematically dismantled the systems that had enabled that betrayal. Tomorrow, I'd begin the process of claiming what was rightfully mine. Tonight, I wanted to celebrate with the people who'd stood by me through the fight. 6 months later, morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse office cast geometric shadows across the architectural models that covered every surface. From my desk, I could see the construction progress on the affordable housing project in Brooklyn, the residential tower in Tribeca where sustainable design principles were being implemented at luxury scale, and the cultural center in Queens that would anchor a community development initiative I'd helped design. Meridian Design Studio now occupied 3 floors of the Soho building, with a staff of 22 and a waiting list of clients that extended 18 months into the future. The recovered assets from Leo's hidden accounts had provided the capital for expansion beyond anything I'd originally dreamed possible. The Times wants to do a follow-up feature, Rena announced, entering my office with her arms full of fabric samples and her laptop balanced precariously on top. 1 year later, how the woman who refused to be erased built a design empire. Empire feels dramatic. Ava, we just signed the contract to design the interiors for the new Museum of Contemporary Art. We're consulting on the Unsustainability Initiative. Architectural Digest is featuring our work on their cover next month. She set everything down and faced me directly. You built an empire. I couldn't argue with the facts. The past year had exceeded every professional goal I'd ever set. More importantly, it had proven that my authentic creative vision could succeed in the marketplace without compromise or apology. What's our agenda today? I asked, settling into the rhythm of leadership that still sometimes surprised me. Client Presentation at 10, the hotel chain that wants to implement our sustainability standards across their properties. Lunch with the mayor's office about the affordable housing expansion. And at 3, the design team wants to show you the preliminary concepts for the Tokyo project. Tokyo, the residential complex we're consulting on. Eli's been working with their architecture team on the sustainable infrastructure, and they want our interiors to complement the environmental systems. The mention of Eli's name brought its familiar warmth. What had begun as a strategic alliance had evolved into something deeper, more complex, and infinitely more satisfying than either of us had expected. Where is he anyway? Conference call. With the developers in Singapore. Something about green roof systems and water reclamation. Rena grinned. He said to tell you he'll pick you up at 7 for the gallery opening. Tonight's event was a celebration I'd been anticipating for weeks. The Museum of Design was unveiling an exhibition about women entrepreneurs who'd rebuilt their businesses after major setbacks. My section would feature the story of Meridian Design Studio alongside profiles of 12 other women who'd transformed professional disasters into competitive advantages. Did the final interview transcript arrive? I asked. On your desk. The journalist was particularly interested in your thoughts about forgiveness versus accountability. I picked up the printed pages, scanning the conversation I'd had 2 weeks earlier with Martha Patterson from Entrepreneur magazine. Patterson, do you regret the public nature of your divorce and business disputes? Caldwell, not for a moment. Keeping Leo's fraud private would have protected him from consequences while leaving me vulnerable to future victimization. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to carry someone else's shame. Patterson, have you forgiven your ex-husband? Caldwell, I've accepted that his choices were about his character limitations, not about my worth as a partner or professional. That's different from forgiveness, which requires acknowledgement of harm and commitment to different behavior. Leo's serving an 18-month sentence for financial fraud. When he's released, if he demonstrates sustained accountability and ethical behavior, we might discuss forgiveness. Patterson, what about your former mother-in-law, Margot Caldwell? Caldwell, Margot's testimony against Leo was strategically motivated rather than ethically driven. She avoided prosecution, but she also destroyed her relationship with both her sons and lost her standing in social circles that valued integrity over influence. I consider that an appropriate outcome. Patterson, looking ahead, what's next for Meridian Design Studio? Caldwell, we're expanding internationally while maintaining our commitment to sustainable, community-centered design. Success isn't just about growth, it's about creating work that reflects your values and contributes to something larger than profit. Reading my own words, I felt proud of the clarity I'd achieved. The woman who'd once edited herself to fit Leo's expectations had been replaced by someone who spoke directly about difficult topics without apology or compromise. Ava, Jonas appeared in my doorway, looking remarkably satisfied for someone who'd supposedly retired from active investigation work. Got a minute? Always? What's the latest? Leo's parole hearing is scheduled for next month. His attorney reached out to ask if you'd be willing to provide testimony about his cooperation in asset recovery, and I told him you'd consider it if Leo wanted to make a public statement acknowledging his financial crimes and apologizing to the business community for undermining trust in interior design partnerships. Jonas grinned. Apparently, public accountability wasn't what he had in mind. Shocking. There's more. Rachel Morrison started her own boutique legal practice focusing on ethical business consulting. She's built a solid reputation by helping other firms implement transparency standards. Good for her. She sent you something. Jonas handed me an envelope with my name written in careful script. Inside was a handwritten note on professional letterhead. Ava, I wanted you to know that the ethical standards you insisted on during our legal proceedings have become the foundation of my new practice. Every client contract I write includes the transparency and accountability measures you demanded from Leo. You taught me that integrity isn't just morally right, it's also good business. I hope our paths cross again under better circumstances. With respect and gratitude, Rochelle folded the note and slipped it back into the envelope. She's learned something anyway. People can change, given the right incentives, Jonas observed. Speaking of which, Eli's here. I looked up to see the man who'd become my partner in every sense of the word standing in my doorway. 6 months of official dating had confirmed What I'd suspected during our first strategic meetings. Eli Caldwell was everything his brother pretended to be. Intelligent without arrogance, confident without manipulation, supportive without expectation of subservience. How was Singapore? I asked, standing to greet him. Productive. They want to implement our sustainability model across their entire residential portfolio. He pulled me close for a brief kiss that still made my pulse quicken. How was your morning? Profitable. Rena says we're an empire now. You're definitely something, he agreed, his eyes warm with the kind of admiration I'd never seen in Leo's gaze. Ready for tonight? Almost. I need to review the Tokyo concepts first. Actually, Rena interjected, I moved that meeting to tomorrow. You have something more important to handle this afternoon. I do? Eli and Rena exchanged glances that suggested conspiracy. There's someone here to see you, Eli said. Someone who's been waiting in the conference room for the past hour. Confused and slightly annoyed, I followed them down the hall to our main conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see a figure in an expensive suit, their back turned toward the door, Margot Caldwell. What is she doing here? I asked, my voice sharp with sudden tension. She asked to speak with you, Eli said quietly. I told her I'd relay the message, but she said it needed to be in person. And you let her in? I thought you might want to hear what she has to say. But Ava, if you're not comfortable, no. I straightened my shoulders, calling on the confidence that had carried me through every difficult conversation of the past year. I'll hear her out. But you're staying. She asked to speak with you alone. She can ask for whatever she wants. I'm setting the terms. We entered the conference room together, and Margot turned to face us. The past year had not been kind to her. The perfectly styled facade remained intact, but there was something diminished about her presence, a loss of the imperial authority that had once made her so intimidating. Ava, you look well. Her voice carried its familiar tone, but the underlying arrogance seemed muted. Margot, what brings you here? I wanted to apologize. The words hung in the air like an unexpected gift. In all my years of knowing Margot Caldwell, I'd never heard her acknowledge wrongdoing, much less apologize for it. For what specifically? For underestimating you, for dismissing your contributions to Leo's success, for believing that protecting my son's reputation was more important than supporting what was right. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. For teaching him that manipulation was acceptable as long as it served family interests. I studied her face, looking for calculation or strategic positioning. Instead, I found something that looked like genuine regret. What changed your mind? Watching him testify at his own trial, listening to him blame everyone except himself for his choices, realizing that my protection had prevented him from developing the character necessary to build something legitimate. She met my eyes directly. And watching you build something extraordinary from what he tried to destroy. So this is about Leo, not about me. This is about recognizing that I was wrong about you from the beginning. You weren't someone trying to use Leo for social advancement. You were someone trying to build something meaningful with a partner who couldn't appreciate what you offered. Eli shifted beside me, but remained silent. What do you want, Margot? Nothing. I wanted to acknowledge that you deserved better from all of us, and to tell you that Eli made the right choice in supporting you instead of protecting family secrets. She turned to her younger son. I've spent the past year thinking about the kind of mother who raises one son to believe he's entitled to whatever he wants and another son to believe he's not worthy of the family name. I failed both of you, but in different ways. Mom, Eli started. Let me finish. Margot's voice carried an echo of her old authority. I can't undo the harm I caused by enabling Leo's worst impulses, but I can acknowledge that Ava represents everything I should have encouraged in my children: integrity, accountability, and the courage to build something rather than simply inheriting it. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the city beyond our windows. I considered Margot's words, weighing them against years of subtle condescension and active hostility. I appreciate the apology, I said finally, but forgiveness isn't something I'm prepared to offer today. I didn't come here expecting forgiveness. I came here to accept responsibility. All right, I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying what you've said. Margot gathered her purse and moved toward the door, then paused. Ava, for what it's worth, I think Leo would have been a different person if he'd learned to value what you brought to the relationship instead of feeling threatened by it, maybe. But that was his choice to make. Yes, it was. After she left, Eli and I stood in the conference room, processing the unexpected encounter. How do you feel? He asked, surprised. Relieved, maybe. Like the last piece of unfinished business just got addressed. I turned to study his expression. How do you feel? Proud of her for finally saying what needed to be said. Proud of you for handling it with such grace. He smiled. And grateful that you trusted me enough to let me stay for that conversation. I trust you completely, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was absolutely true. Which is why I have something to tell you. What? I pulled the small blue box from my desk drawer, the same box I'd been carrying for 3 weeks while waiting for the right moment. Eli Caldwell, will you marry me? His expression shifted from surprise to delight to something deeper and more lasting. Are you serious? Completely serious. We're partners and everything else. I want to make it official. Yes, he said, pulling me close. Obviously yes, as he slipped the ring onto his finger, a simple platinum band that matched the one I'd chosen for myself. I felt the final transformation complete. The woman who'd once planned anniversary surprises for a man who was plotting her betrayal had become someone who chose her own partner based on mutual respect and genuine affection. That evening, at the Museum of Design exhibition opening, I stood before the display that told the story of Meridian Design Studios' first year. The timeline showed every major milestone: the discovery of Leo's fraud, the legal proceedings, the business launch, the major client acquisitions, the expansion into international markets. But the story it told wasn't really about revenge or even justice. It was about the discovery that being betrayed by someone you trust can either destroy you or teach you to trust yourself completely. What are you thinking? Eli asked, joining me in front of the display. That a year ago, I thought my life was ending. I was wrong, it was just beginning. Any regrets? I looked around the gallery, filled with potential clients, industry colleagues, and friends who'd supported me through the transformation. Tessa was deep in conversation with a journalist about women's legal rights in business partnerships. Rena was explaining our sustainable design philosophy to a group of architecture students. Jonas was charming the museum director with stories about corporate investigation techniques. Not one, I said. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is losing everything you thought you wanted and finding out what you actually need, and learning that you're strong enough to build it yourself. 6 months later, Meridian Design Studio would open offices in London and Tokyo. A year after that, our affordable housing designs would be implemented in 12 cities across 3 continents. But standing in that gallery, surrounded by people who valued my work and loved me for who I actually was, I already had everything I needed. The woman who'd paid off her husband's debt and received divorce papers in return was gone. In her place stood someone who understood her own worth and refused to accept less than she deserved from anyone. It had taken the worst betrayal of my life to teach me the most important lesson. The only person whose approval I truly needed was my own, and I had it. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.